Okay. My name is Candy Fredericks, and I'm the New Jersey PTA president. I'd like to welcome you, all of you, for coming on tonight to our very important webinar. And I would like to introduce Marjorie Smith. She is an attorney as well as an EMT for the last 26 years. She is a life member of the South Orange Rescue Squad and a CPR first aid instructor. Tonight, she will be discussing the history of 911 as well as the importance of teaching our children to call 911. Please put all questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to answer all questions before the end of the webinar. Thank you for attending tonight. Marjorie?
Thank you, Candy, and I thank the New Jersey State PTA for inviting me to present this webinar. I'm honored to be here. In full disclosure, I would like to say a few things about myself. Full disclosure, I am related to Carrie Smith, as some of you may know, if not all of you. Currently, I live down in Florida. I've lived down in Florida for the past 13, 14 years. However, I am a Jersey girl at heart. I was born in New Jersey. I am an EMT and an attorney, and I maintain my certifications both here in Florida and in New Jersey. The impetus for this particular webinar is that I help the Lake Mary Rescue Squad or fire department. Down here, EMS is through the fire departments. So I do volunteer and help the Lake Mary Fire Department teach CPR. I was teaching CPR, the hands-only CPR, at the farmer's market. We usually do that once a month. And as we were teaching the hands-only CPR, parents would come with their little ones in tow, and the little ones would try to compress the mannequins and actually try and practice doing CPR. But as you can imagine, the mannequins were very hard for them to press. Sometimes it's hard for the adults to do a compression appropriately or adequately. So I started thinking everyone should be able to, at one point or another, be involved in the emergency process, whether it be calling 911 or actually doing something actively to help someone in need. So as I saw this need that the kids were not able to do the compressions, I said, all right, let me start with the vantage point of, can you call 911? So we took out our phones, our cell phones, obviously, and many of them didn't even know the number is 911. So I started thinking again, do you know your names? Do you know your addresses? Do you know your phone numbers? And it became quite disappointing and dismaying that most preschoolers and kindergartners did not know their addresses and their phone numbers. You will see in a slide a little later on that about 91% of kindergartners and preschoolers do not know their addresses and phone numbers. So I saw a need here, a need immediately, that we have to teach our kids how to be able to react in an emergency, and at the very least call 911. But in order to call 911, they have to know their addresses, their names, and their phone numbers. one other thing, and when I say preschoolers, you'll see some slides where there have been very successful calls made by preschoolers, age 3, 4. Up until then, it's unrealistic to expect a child to become involved in the emergency process. But preschool and beyond, absolutely, everybody should be able to be involved in the emergency process. One other thing I would note, now this is just calling 911, but I think schools and parents should also encourage their middle schoolers and their high schoolers to learn CPR. The state of Washington has the most successful CPR survival rate in the country because they have a program where the schools require high schoolers to take CPR and successfully get their CPR cards. So the thrust of this evening is everyone should be able to be involved successfully with the 911 process. If there are any questions along the way, Candy said that we will answer them at the end. Carrie, if you could go back to just the title page, please. Emergent We One is a play on words for emergency one. And emerge We One is let's get our kids to emerge and learn successfully how to be a part of this 911 process. Okay. Our children can save lives. This is an important fact for teachers and parents to realize. They can be very successful. They don't have to do the compressions. They don't have to put out the fires. They don't have to stop the bleeding, but they don't have to get somebody out of a car if it's in an automobile accident. However, if they know how to call 911, they will save lives in all of the various incidents that I have just mentioned and more. Okay, the next couple of slides will show incidents of actual children who have saved lives. Okay, December 2019, there was a four-year-old from Franklin Township who called 911 when her mom became totally unresponsive. She called 911 and said to the 911 operator, "My mom fell down and she can't talk." Her 2-year-old sister and 1-year-old twin brothers were at home. But Isla had the presence of mind to stay on that phone, and she spoke to the dispatcher as she waited for help to arrive. She unlocked the door for police. So here is an incident, an actual true story where a 4-year-old saved her mother's life. June 2018, a 3-year-old from Cleveland, Texas, called 911. All she did, she knew how to dial 911, but all she was able to say to the dispatcher was "mommy." She was unable to give the dispatcher any more information. But the Liberty County Sheriff's Office was able to track the cell phone to find out generally the location of the call. And after a 30-minute search, Dorothy's mother was found and assistance was rendered. So even though Dorothy could not really speak effectively, she knew how to dial 911. In 2010, we have 5-year-old Savannah, who called 911 to get help for her father, who was having chest pain and trouble breathing. Savannah stayed on the line for 10 minutes. She was concerned for both her dad's condition and also how she was dressed. She said to the 911 operator that she was only in her pajamas, dear child. She said that her dad needed oxygen quickly. Many of these kids are very perceptive and they know if their parents have medical conditions, just what they do need. And she assured, this was a very mature child, she assured the dispatcher that she was staying at her father's side and was talking to him. So here's another story where an intruder fatally shot an Ohio woman and fled with her 4-year-old son, abandoning him at a highway rest stop. He was able to tell some Good Samaritans his address and his parents' names, and this led to the discovery of his slain mother and the return of the boy to his father. So do we have one more, Carrie? No. So there are true stories of children of young age, starting 3 and then 4 and 5, who were able to successfully get help for their loved ones. Now, later on in this webinar, we're going to look at what children should be taught about what is actually an emergency. I'm sure we've all seen stories where children will call 911 and ask for help with their homework. This is not an emergency. So again, children can save lives. Now, the history of 911. We all take things for granted, and until I started really working on this webinar, I too took 911 for granted. The 911 started really in 1957 when the National Association of Fire Chiefs recommended that there be a single number for reporting fires. At that point, people saw a fire and they were calling various numbers, and they couldn't coordinate their firefighting efforts with all of these numbers that were being called. Okay, I don't know, Carrie, if you can get a poll of people who remember the 1964 incident where Kitty Genovese was attacked on the street in New York and nobody came to help her. Do we have any polling ability? Somebody heard about that in law school. Okay. So here you have this horrific attack of this woman, Kitty Genovese, and people stood by and watched or ignored her. 911 was not in existence at that time, but nobody bothered picking up the phone and asking for help. That really made the news back then. 1967, the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice recommended the creation of a single number that could be used nationwide for reporting emergencies. 1967, the Federal Trade Commission met with AT&T to choose a universal number to be used for emergencies. And in 1968, AT&T chose 911 as the universal number because simply it was simple. However, they chose 911 as the number to use in 1968. However, the rollout of 911 still took many years. Now, it's important to note that the 911 emergency service only affected the Bell System telephone companies. So independent phone companies were not included in the emergency telephone plan. So this shows it just wasn't a simple matter of rolling out 911 because not everybody was included. This I found quite incredulous. Several cities declined 911 service due to the cost and their failure to recognize the benefits of 911 emergency service. Is anybody surprised by that? 1979, 911 service was available only to 26% of the population, US population. 1987, Doris said not surprised. Thank you, Doris, for the feedback. 1987, only 50% of the US population had 911 service available to them. 2000, we creep up to 93% of the US population, and 2002, 911 service is now available to 98.9% of the US population. Okay, this is the slide that I was referring to, which is why I put together this webinar, because I was shocked to find out how many preschoolers and kindergarten age children were unable to call 911. Anybody else surprised by that number? Did you think it was more? Did you think it was less? And then I have another less. Okay. So people generally think that most children do know their addresses and phone numbers. Okay. How many, another question for people. How many of you have children and have taught or emphasized teaching your children their addresses and phone numbers? Okay. Good. Okay. Now look at all the thumbs up. Did that ASAP. Okay. All right. With that survey where they found that it was 91% of the children who were unable to handle themselves in emergency, first of all, they were unable to recognize when a situation was an emergency. Children were unable to call for help and describe the problem, and children did not know their phone numbers and addresses. Now, as we saw for that, with that one description of a child that all she could say was mommy, so she was not able to describe the situation, but she did have the presence of mind to call 911. All right, recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics. It encourages parents to start training their children as young as 3 to begin to call 911. And they also feel that schools should require an emergency training curriculum. How do people feel about that? Either 1 or 2 or both. Okay, Doris, your son, how old was your son, Doris, when he called 911? Okay. So everybody, or most people agree that as young as 3 children should begin to be taught how to call 911. And from what I can see from the comments, schools should require an emergency training curriculum. All right, both. Children, as we all know, develop differently, so that the age that they will be able to memorize their names, addresses, and phone numbers varies. That goes without saying. However, we feel that learning this information should start in preschool, even if it's not completely learned by the end of preschool. At least the training has started. Fred Rothbaum, a child development professor at Tufts University, says that an average children should know their names, addresses, and phone numbers between the ages of 4 to 6. One mother reported that with constant practice, it took her 4.5-year-old daughter 2 weeks to remember her name, address, and phone number. And I recently, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, taught my 5-year-old granddaughter her address and phone number. Now, I only saw her once a week, but even on that once a week basis, it took me about 2 weeks to teach her. So all it takes is practice. All right. Learning is fun, or learning should be fun. And here we have the next several slides suggest techniques for teaching children their addresses and phone numbers. Okay, singing your address to Farmer in the Dell. Carrie, do you want to sing?
Nope.
All right, I'm not going to sing and scare everybody either, but here is one way of singing your address to Farmer in the Dell. My name is, and so forth and so on. This is where I live, house name, street name, and city and state. Or sing your address to where has my little dog gone? Sing your phone number to Frere Jacques. If anybody has a good singing voice and they're willing to try any of these, we'd be happy to listen. So here are some singing ways to teach addresses and phone numbers. Okay, clapping is another way to teach children their phone numbers. This is easy and I think self-explanatory. Okay. Write out your names, sorting games. Write out your names and parts of your address on index cards. This is the method that I used with my granddaughter. On one index card each, one I put her first name, second one I put her last name, then another one her house number, another index card her street name, and then another index card the city in which she lives and the state in which she lives. And even if they don't know how to read completely, they will begin to sight read what the index cards say. So first I put all of the index cards in the correct order and went over the name, first name, last name, house name, street name, city, and state numerous times. Then I mixed them up and she had to put them in the correct order. And she had a marvelous time doing this. And not only was she having fun, but she was learning her name and address. And you can also do this sorting game with your phone number. Okay, practice dialing. Now you can either print out a cell phone keypad or use a toy phone, and you practice dialing your phone number. And then, of course, you're going to practice dialing 911 as well. All right, teaching the children about 911. 911 happens when you, 911 should be called if you need the police, or if you need the fire department, or if you need medical attention. Okay, when to call 911. I think most children would know that if there's a fire, they call 911. When somebody is unconscious, they call 911. They should know that if somebody is sick and unable to speak, this is an emergency. If somebody has difficulty breathing, this is an emergency. If there's a car accident, other than just a minor tap, that is an emergency, or if there is a break-in. Okay. They should also be prepped as to what questions the 911 dispatcher or operator is likely to ask them, and you can role play with them. They call 911, so you say, what is your name and address? What is the emergency? So they have to describe, is it a fire? Did somebody break in? They're scared. Who needs help? Who is with you? They should also know that they will probably be scared or nervous as they are making these calls. Emphasize, stay calm. Above all, emphasize, talk slowly and loud enough so that the dispatcher can hear and understand what is wrong and what help is needed. Never call 911 as a joke. They don't call 911 when they need help with their homework. Make sure that they are safe. I cannot emphasize this enough, and you have to emphasize this with the children. They don't call 911 before they themselves are safe. If the house is on fire, leave the house. If they are in the car accident, make sure that it is safe to evacuate the car, but make sure that they are safe before they dial 911. If the fire is in their house, leave the house and go to a neighbor's house and then call 911. Also, do not hang up before the dispatcher says it is okay to hang up. Usually, not usually, the dispatchers are very, very good at keeping children on the line and staying with them, keeping them calm. Another thing to emphasize with children, not only children, adults tend to do this too. You're asked a question and you nod your head in response. You don't nod your head. Answer the questions that are asked. Okay, here are some tests to, or questions to ask your children. Do you call 911 if your friend falls out of a tree and is badly hurt? Let's see. Fire, yes. Do you call 911 if you're home alone and you're bored and lonely? Obviously, no. Do you call 911 if you have an argument with your best friend? Obviously, no. Do you call 911 if your dog is limping? Obviously, no. So you can make up various scenarios for children and see whether they can discern, is this an emergency or is it not an emergency? Now, I will tell you a true story. Carrie may remember this. I was riding with the South Orange Rescue Squad, and I get a call from the dispatcher that this family wanted the ambulance to take their dog to the vet. And here's an adult calling 911, not a child. So unfortunately, not all adults can discern what is an emergency and what is not an emergency. Okay, landline. Landline is easy. You hold down the receiver button and have your child press the buttons 911. This is practicing with the phone, obviously. The cell phone. If you can see on the bottom half of the picture, there are pink Post-its on the wall. You can make up a keypad or a keyboard on the wall and show your children which numbers to touch. Then you can practice on the real phone. You do not have to give your child your passcode to unlock your phone because many parents, have their passcodes in there. You can show your child the emergency key, which will unlock the phone. I did not know about the emergency key until I started working on this webinar. Also remember, and I do this all the time, I'll be making a phone call and I forget to press send. So you also have to emphasize, as part of the 911 call training, is you dial 911 and then you press the send button. Again, this requires practice, practice, and practice. I was very pleased to find out that there are apps to teach the child 911. And here are the two apps that you can look for in the App Store. One is Ready, Set, Dial, and the other is Kids Practice 911 Dialer. So you might want to, and they're free apps. Okay. Anybody have any questions, or is everybody satisfied and convinced that we must do more to teach children how to get involved in the 911 process? Must teach, absolutely. Thank you, Bernice. I hope everyone learned something from this evening's webinar. As I said, I learned quite a bit as I was putting this together. You're very welcome, Roxanne. Any questions? Thank you, Charles. Feel better, Doris. Sarita, thank you. Okay, nice feedback. Anybody have any questions? Second question. Well, maybe somebody from the state PTA can answer that last question. I don't, this is the first webinar, this is the first organization that I have presented this webinar to. So my guess is it has not been rolled out in the schools. And I'm trying to, down in Florida, as I said, we are fire-based. Our fire department goes into the schools to teach CPR, and I have asked them to add this to part of the CPR training and to go into specifically preschools and to kindergarten classes. Oh, second grade. Thank you. Thank you. All right, that's great.
Okay, I would like to thank everybody for coming on tonight. I hope you did learn a lot, and I really would like to thank Marjorie for coming on and doing this for us. Thank you very much, Marjorie.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Again, thank you for everyone for coming on, and have a great evening. And we will be doing another, the Health and Safety Committee of New Jersey PTA will be doing another webinar next month on nutrition.